Hey guys, this is Vince with Practical Performance. This is the first part of an installation series for the convertible specific front gusset cups. We will be, in this video series, we will be installing the left side. So actually, I'm sitting where I've removed the seats and I'm sitting where the passenger, the right seat would be normally. And I'm viewing the car backwards. So confusingly enough, that's the right side, that's the left side. So I'm going to be using that terminology. The purpose of this video is to show you how you use, first of all, the cutting template, so this is the left side. They're slightly different, which is confusing. I don't know why BMW did that, but that's the way it is anyway. So we have the right side and the left side have different parts. This is the right side cutting plate, and that I have put up here. Well, actually I haven't, because this is the development side. So there's a separate series for that, how I kind of came to this design. Anyway, the purpose is to cut out a piece like this on that side. And once that's done, we will be drilling from the bottom up. First a guide hole, and then we'll be using some specific tools, a guide sleeve, I'll get to that later on, and the guide rod, which is longer for the convertible specific kit. We'll be drilling upwards and then downwards, and obviously to be able to do that, that's why we've removed this piece here. Once that's done and we've done some preparation on the bottom, this is what you'll be fitting, the convertible specific gusset cup. So that's kind of a sort of a brief summary of what we're going to be doing here. So back to the left side. This specific convertible has the phone module, so we'll be removing the bracket here, getting that out of the way, unconnecting those. I will be using this template. As you can see here, let's see if I can get a bit closer. There's a welded on nut on the back side here. That nut looks like this. This nut we will be removing later on. So it sits on, so this is again from the right side. In this particular case, remember I said they were quite a little bit different. So this sat at a 45 degree towards that. And that's why we cut down that way. On this side, interestingly enough, it's not angled, so it's sitting again on the back side. It's sitting like that, if that makes sense, straight up. So the shape for cutting this is slightly different. I'll get to that later on as well. As we do that, I'll show you, you need to remove some of this weld altogether, some of this weld, then cut it out, and then we'll go from there. So I'm just gonna tie this first little section up and remove that stuff, and we'll get forward. So now the phone module is removed. It was a little bit tricky getting it out. So the top tip here is remove this piece of the sort of extra bracket here temporarily to get it out, and then you should be able to wiggle it out. There are 4 connectors. There's 1, 2, 3, and then there's a large one out on this side. So what I did is remove this, pulled it to the side, remove that connector, and then wiggle it out. So, and then I put I sort of just dragged the harness down that way. So moving on, I used the cutting template and just an ordinary M8 screw. I would suggest using the ones where the cover sits with. This is actually a hole for that cover. And now you use your preferred, like a Sharpie pen, or in my case, I used one of these, just a sharp piece of metal, and I traced the edge on this side and that side, so I scarred the paint here. We'll be cutting down that way in the next sort of section. I also want to say that we will be removing that, and we will be removing the nut, because this is the the epoxy rivet method. And what we want is to get this piece back into there. We also want a nut to be able to pull this all together. So there is this reinforcement piece, and this was part of the kit, and you have a new nut welded on there. So it will be sitting on the back side like this. Actually, let me show you that. So they sit together like this, goes on the back side. You screw it all together and use the epoxy and rivet. So that's kind of just again a brief overview. We'll be moving on. I'm going to be removing this temporary template, and I'll be cutting with a combination of a sawzall and maybe a hacksaw blade, and well, actually a sawzall there, and probably my Dremel down this way. We will be needing to remove part of that weld there and this weld here in order to get this out. Before I move on cutting, I just wanted to show you the marking there. I also wanted to mention, I forgot that all these blue dots, they're part of the result of the development process. And that's actually for making sure that the rivet holes are correctly placed. Having thought about it, and in the interest of keeping the amount of special tools down, I just tried to use an ordinary manual hacksaw here. Worked like a charm. Cut this down to there. There is sort of a lip. Let me see if I can show you that. Here is the left side piece, the corresponding. So you have, this piece here that sits down that way. Let's see if you can see it from here. Yeah, there you go. You can see the scarring there from the hacksaw. I'm not quite sure if I went all the way down. If I haven't, I'll be checking that later on. When I'm removing this, I'll just saw some more. I just don't want to scar the piece back like the structure of the bulkhead too much. Now I'm going to move on using my Dremel, cutting down this way. I will probably use a combination of the Dremel and a small angle grinder to remove the weld here. So obviously I removed the back seat and I took out some insulation and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into that here. I do recommend removing the seats. It's so much easier. I have chosen to leave the interior panels. You could obviously take those out if you wanted to, but I'm using like a fire blanket to cover the sides. I will add another one over there before I use the angle grinder, just to make sure that I don't damage the interior. So moving on. Using my Dremel, well, actually a knockoff. I have two of these, one with a cutting blade and one with a grinding disc. Sorry, cutting disc and grinding disc. Even so, with the thin grinding disc, you can see how much wider that cut is than the hacksaw. Anyway, I cut down as far as I'm comfortable at this point. There's still some of the weld left there. I will be cutting the weld this way, and I'm going to be using the angle grinder, cutting that, and maybe also the cutting disc on the Dremel as well. There we go. I cut a little bit more horizontally here with the Dremel. I used my angle grinder to cut in to that weld there, as far as I'm comfortable at this point. It's now loose to the point where I can sort of wiggle it a little bit. I'm gonna be doing that and maybe add some extra cut as I'm going to remove this, and I'll check back with you. Just rocking this back and forth worked like a charm, getting the last piece of that weld to sort of break off. I did have to use the hacksaw to cut down a little bit more into the lip, and actually I realized this side here is perfectly show you what I mean with that lip. Let's see if I have something to point with. There you go. So it's this lip here. So obviously I haven't gotten too far enough, I should say, into it here when using the Dremel. So now I'm using just a loose hacksaw blade like this cutting in like that. And here you can see you want to keep it sort of level to this surface here so you don't cut into that too much. I cut down the vertical cut there, and there's still some of the weld left in that corner there. So there is room, if you sort of move this a little bit, to stick a hacksaw blade in there. I found just now that turning the blade such that you cut when you're pulling, if I put it that way, rather than when you're pushing. So you're pulling and using it just like on Japanese saw, it's easier to cut that. This side, the left side, is a little bit trickier than the right side. Remember I said they're not quite the same. You would think that BMW would just mirror the design, but as you can see, well, the higher piece here is on the inboard side, and the lower piece is on the outbound side. This is actually the opposite, and as I mentioned, the nut is different. It's actually moved outwards as well, and therefore in this case we have to cut into the weld. On this side here, you will not need to cut into the weld. You're just cutting right down to the end of it there. And you only have to cut off that weld there. So that said, I'm going to be cutting that last piece off and show you what's underneath. The last of the weld is cut off there in the corner. You can see that there. This is the back side. Notice how that nut is, I don't know what you call it. It's not angled, at least. It's sort of, you know, flush. That top surface is like this rather than slanted, which it is on the other side, which is weird. Anyway, this is what it looks like. The upcoming step will be to drill from the bottom side of the car up through the subframe mount. The drill will be hitting two surfaces that are slanted. First, this side surface here, which is the extension of that. This is where the, let's call it the standard VinceBar front gusset cup sits on the coupe, sedan, and the touring. The convertible is different because of this whole bulkhead structure. And the bulkhead structure introduces this, so we need to drill through first this and then that. They're both at an angle, so the drill kind of tends to want to go backwards and at an angle, I can't remember. It typically goes that way, I think. Sorry, that way, I think. So for the convertible, and because we're going so far high up, so far up, which also creates more wiggling, I have developed a guide sleeve. I'll show you that later on. But nevertheless, the tip of the drill bit will sort of hit right here, and therefore it's a good idea to remove that weld, making it easier for the drill bit to come up without having sort of a distorted direction. So anyway, I'll remove that weld, and then I'll show you the drilling part from the underside. We're now on the underside of the car. We're viewing that's the right front mount, subframe mount. That's the left subframe mount right there. Before we get to work on the left side, which is what we're doing on the top as well, I just wanted to show you to get up all the way up through the 2 layers of floors. You will be getting an extended 10mm drill bit that goes up through the mount. It cuts through the mount actually first. It's a bottom hole originally. Then it moves up, it goes through the first layer and then the second layer. But as you can see, there is quite some wiggle room here. And this is what makes, so if I put that all the way in, you'll see that it moves, but the actual movement is not too much. That would be the case with the standard kit. Now, if we move that out, you can see the absolute movement is a lot more. So therefore, for the convertible, I created this guide sleeve. So the guide sleeve goes this way into the mount. There's a machine surface there, so this actually kind of clicks in really, and it will be supported by this support bracket that holds the subframe. And once you have that in there, there's a whole lot. It doesn't demonstrate really well here because the whole thing wiggles, but I'll show you on the other side. So I will be putting this up there like that, and we'll be swinging this over and screwing it up. And the as you can see, the guide sleeve is then supported by this bracket, and I'll show you in a bit. The guide sleeve is in place. The bracket is also screwed up, just finger tight there. You can see, I believe you should be able to see if I have hold the camera still. This still has some wiggle room, but to remedy that, so this nut, you screw that counterclockwise, pushing it, well actually pushing it, this will be pushing the whole sleeve up towards there. These two surfaces will line up, and now it's really steady there. You only need to do that finger tight again. Otherwise you'll sort of be bending that. It's very unnecessary. So anyway, the long drill, see there we are, the long drill bit goes up into that hole, and now there is a whole lot less of the wiggling going on. So there's guidance all the way here up through the subframe mount, and which is going to help us when we hit those slanted surfaces. Now another thing, I've thoroughly cleaned the underside, which I documented in a separate video. So much nicer to be working out without the dirt and grime, and obviously also did that in order to inspect the underside of the rear axle carrier panel, the ARCP. This is the only crack I could find. This is the typical hairline crack. This is the left rear mount. I will be adding the stage 1 Vinskins. That will be a separate installation video. What I did is I inspected there. I inspected the right side, obviously. Typically you will see with a car with more damage, you would see the right front. There's a lot of cracks going on around here as well. Less so on the left side. The top side is also cracked, which is why if you have damage to that extent here, the top side will be cracked as well, and that's where we're adding the gusset caps. In this case, it's all fine, but in preventive measure, we're adding them, and also in order to show you the installation. Now, if there had been more damage, I would go off and check the inner wheel arch. There's some spot welds and a MIG weld there. You would see separation around this area. You would see spot weld hidden under the seam sealer here. You can sort of see the contours of them there. You'd see that start separating, and then you'd be in quite a lot of trouble getting all that done. So my recommendation is the VinceBar that sits up on top of here, which we'll get to later on as well. That helps unload, well actually it does unload the whole RACP, negating the whole issue. So do that sooner rather than later, and also add obviously the front gusset cups. So that said, I'm going to be moving on now and drilling up through here and show you where the drill bit ends up. Before I drill all the way through, I just wanted to show you at what an unfavorable angle position the drill bit is to protrude that surface. So it's at a very steep angle, and you could clearly see where there needs to be some more guidance. I also recommend going careful and not pushing too hard, because you will wear out the drill bit. I want to show you just how far up the drill bit is and why you need that extra long drill bit as well. Having moved yet a bit further up, you can again see just how unfavorable that is. So when I say unfavorable, it's because it's pushing it at an angle there, pushing it to the side because of the angle, and also the cutting angle of the drill bit is completely off. And also you can see how we're now drilling straight through the weld, so it's even harder material as well. So that's why I was saying do grind off that weld. Maybe you even want to cut a little bit there, actually, as I'm thinking. That would make it easier. So the drill bit is through, and as you can see by the discoloration of the tip, it was working hard. I was probably pushing it a little bit too much, which makes me think that it would be safe to cut away a little bit more of that weld, maybe even grind down the corner, the bend here. Anyway, so we've drilled through from the bottom side, sorry. The next step will be to open up that larger hole there using the hole saw. And just as with the ordinary kit, the standard front gusset kit, the tooling kit for that, there is the bore, the actual hole saw, the white piece, and then the drilling guide rod. Now this is a longer rod because of, you know, the higher, we're moving further up. We also have the guide sleeve, and the bore is also specially prepared as well to allow for the thicker part of the rod here to move into it. If you want to know more about that, there's a separate video of the actual creating this tool. So I'm going to be removing the drill bit. I'm going to be taking the actually I'm probably going to be using my power drill with the cord. This is kind of tough drilling down or sawing down through. This is kind of thick, actually. I think this is a 1.5 millimeter, the surface here. And then we have the second surface. Yeah, and I didn't mention that while drilling, but as you can see on the rod here, I added some grease. I did that for the drill bit as well, so you avoid galling between the drill bit or this guide rod and the guide sleeve. So moving on, I will be removing that and coming back and drilling down through, or sawing down through, these two surfaces. Because of these, you see the metal shavings that are a result of drilling through at an angle. You can also see the thickness of the plate there, the sheet metal. By the way, so because of that, it was actually not trivial to get this down through the multiple layers. So what I did is I took the power drill and the drill, and I drilled through it like this a couple of times, just pulling it up and down and making sure that shavings like this are sort of you know, shaved off, if that makes sense. And now with a little bit of wiggling, you can put this down, and well, at least I did it. There you go. So it goes down through and into the guide sleeve. Now again, I rather than using the battery Ryobi, I'm using my trusted cord power drill, and I'm partly because I can adjust the RPM, and partly because it's just stronger. What we'll do is when I drill, I usually stand over here, hold this very steadily because it's cutting just on part of the circumference, it will be choppy. It's less choppy with the guide rod and the guide sleeve, but nevertheless you want to hold this still, because if you start, you know, moving it back and forth, it will be chopping more and less, if that makes sense. So next step will be sawing through with a hole saw. For the drilling, I set up the camera. As you can maybe see, standing up inside. Obviously the top is down, you've probably seen that before. And I'm here in order to, as I said previously, hold the power drill in a really steady grip. So what we'll do now is, with relatively high RPM, saw through it and feeding downwards slowly. So not pushing it, we're gonna let it cut through. bit choppy. Choppy enough to knock my phone camera over. So as you can see, this is as far as I get in the first cut. It bottoms out here. So what I need to do now is, the easiest way of doing this is just cut that straight over. I'm going to do that with my Dremel and then keep going. Having cut this piece off, I should now be able to keep going. And I'm going to line this up with the mount and with the guiding sleeve, and then keep going carefully. Now the reason it got extra choppy there for a while, as you can see, was that we not only cut through this, we also cut through the underlying other layer, and then there's a little bracket there as well, which interestingly is used for holding the backrest of the back seat on tourings, well actually on the non-folding the sedans with the non-folding rear backrests, and it's also used for holding a piece of the touring backrest, if you will. And interestingly enough, it's there even on the convertible, hidden behind those two layers. Anyway, so now I need to remove this piece here, and I need to fold that over in order to keep going. This piece here, it came off really easy. Actually, sorry, no, it was this way. It was almost not even connected there anymore. This other piece here, I had to work a little bit more with, sorry. So I folded this back and forth like this until it broke off. Just like you would do with a nail, I guess. So now at this moment we have these different layers I need to cut through, and as you've probably seen, this is getting a little bit wobbly now because I got onto that choppiness. So my recommendation is go really slowly in terms of feeding it downwards in order to avoid that. I've kept going here for a little bit, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to advise you and warn you not to go too deep, because you could easily cut into this bottom surface there, which is what you want to keep. So at this point, feed a bit, pull it out like I did right now, check where you are, and then go a little bit more and repeat until you kind of just have to wiggle this off. So now this is broken loose, and we have not cut into the layer we want to keep there. That's the top of the front mount on the left side. So at this point, it's a good idea to start cleaning up a bit. Actually, I'm going to be deburring here first. I highly advise that so you don't cut yourself. And then I'm going to bring out my vacuum cleaner and get this cleaned up before we move on. So we remove this piece first, and then we drilled, we cut through and remove this piece. This is scrap, this is scrap, this is scrap here, and this as well. So all of that is going to be replaced with the gusset cup. This piece here we will be keeping. I'll be showing you later on how we remove this nut to be able to reuse this piece and fit it back into there once the the gusset cup is in. So again, I'm going to be deburring. I'm going to be cleaning this up. And before we wrap up the first part here of the installation, I'm going to show you what this looks like when it's cleaned up. I've now deburred the sharp edges using just an ordinary half-round file. I've also cleaned up the top surface here of the front mount with some brake cleaner and a piece of paper towel, essentially. I just wanted to mention that I'm happy to say that this is a 330i convertible, has no cracks up here, not on the left side and nor on the right side. It's more common on the right than the left. So that's good. However, it's not so, what should I say? In terms of selling this kit and illustrating while we're doing this, it's not as good. But anyway, what we want to do now is I'm going to wrap up part 1, and in part 2 we will be grinding down, see if I can have it focus, grinding down these MIG welds, make it flat. We will be drilling out this hole from 10, which is the long drill bit, to 10.5, because that's the minor diameter of the fine threaded M12 times 1.5. So the major diameter is 12, obviously, the minor is 10.5. So we need to drill this up to 10.5, otherwise it will be a bit too tight, because we'll be tapping this as well. We'll be adding, threading it, I should say, from the bottom up. So we'll be doing that. We will be test mounting the actual gusset cup. We will be drilling the holes. We will be prepping everything, making it ready for the actual adhesive, the epoxy, and the rivet, and the sort of final assembly, which will be in part 3. So wrapping up part 1, please help me out spreading this by liking the video, and I very much appreciate that.